worship and prayer, psalms, singing, blessing, and the rhythm of praise. Worship in the Jerusalem assembly rose from the earth like a living fire. It was not confined to appointed hours or crowded into a single place. It burned in the temple courts, in the narrow streets, in upper rooms, in courtyards, shaded by fig trees and at the simple wooden tables where families ate their evening bread. Worship flowed from hearts that remembered Yahweh's works and from lips that carried the name of Yeshua with reverence and joy. It was the breath of the assembly, the pulse of the covenant path. At dawn, when the gates of the temple opened and the morning sacrifice was laid upon the altar, many from the assembly stood among Israel with faces lifted toward the rising sun. They spoke the Shema with steady voices, proclaiming Yahweh as one and renewing their devotion to love Him with all heart, soul, and strength. Their confession mingled with the prayers of priests and pilgrims. They did not separate themselves from the people of Israel. They stood as Israel fulfilled, men and women whose hearts had been pierced by the risen King and filled with Yahweh's breath. Psalms rose in the courts like wind through cedar branches. Sometimes an apostle would begin a familiar line, "Yahweh is my shepherd," and the people would continue with voices woven together like threads in a garment. Other times the assembly sang quietly among themselves, blessing Yahweh for His mercy, His power, His covenant, His salvation through Yeshua. The courts that once held only ritual now vibrated with living praise. As the hours passed and the sun climbed high, worship spilled into the day's work. Men sang while repairing nets. Women hummed melodies while kneading dough. Elders recited blessings over those they visited. Children repeated psalms as they walked behind their fathers. The Ruach stirred worship not as a moment, but as a rhythm, moving through routine and labor like breath sustaining the body. At the 9th hour, when prayers rose again from the temple, the assembly gathered once more. Some stood beneath Solomon's porch where the apostles taught. Others waited in the shade of the walls. Words of praise mingled with petitions for boldness, healing, endurance, and mercy. When the Ruach moved, hearts trembled. When He comforted, tears flowed. When He strengthened, courage rose like a lion waking at the scent of dawn. Evening brought worship into the home. Lamps flickered against stone walls as families gathered. A father lifted his voice and blessed Yahweh for bread and breath. A mother added her own thanksgiving. Children learned the ancient blessings by hearing them each night, their young voices joining soft and sure. The table became an altar, and every meal a remembrance of the Master who broke bread and told His disciples to do the same in memory of Him. Songs flowed freely in these gatherings. Songs from David, songs from ascent up the mountain, songs from exile, songs from deliverance. Some sang with strong voices, others with whispers, but all sang from hearts steadied by hope. These songs were not performed. They were lived. They carried sorrow and joy, longing and confidence, confession and praise. Through them the assembly spoke to Yahweh, and Yahweh warmed the hearts of His people. Sometimes prophets spoke while worship rose, offering words that cut through fear or strengthened weary bones. Sometimes elders prayed over the sick as the assembly sang around them. Sometimes the whole household sat in silence, listening for the Ruach's whisper between the breaths of their own prayer. Worship moved with the moment, never forced, always anchored in Scripture, always flowing toward Yahweh and His Anointed One. Blessing filled the households like incense. Fathers lifted hands over their children, speaking words of peace and strength. Mothers spoke comfort over those burdened with sorrow. Brothers laid hands on one another, praying for endurance. Elders blessed households, filling their entrances with words that guarded and guided. These blessings were not empty. They were cords binding the assembly to Yahweh's care. As night deepened and lamps dimmed, worship did not cease. It rested in the hearts of the assembly like embers beneath ash, glowing in the dark hours. Many prayed before sleep, whispering thanks for the day and asking Yahweh to keep watch through the night. Some rose before dawn to lift quiet prayers. The whole assembly lived inside a rhythm of praise, morning prayer, midday strength, evening blessing, nighttime trust. This was worship in Jerusalem, not a weekly gathering, but a daily flame, not a performance, but a way of life, not a ritual, but a breath. Their praise rose from bread shared, from teachings heard, from mercy shown, from healing received, from hope in Yeshua's return. The Ruach HaKodesh filled their worship with fire, fire that purified, fire that united, fire that rose like incense before the throne of Yahweh. Thus the assembly walked the covenant path with hearts burning, voices lifted and tables filled with the sound of worship. Their praise shaped their days until each day became a step toward the kingdom, each song a lantern for the night, and each prayer a cord tying them to the hope of Yeshua's appearing.